All right, everybody. Thank you, Clint. We are live. Neal, wake up.
There he goes. There we go. It's
Okay, we
official.
are live, ladies and gentlemen, on YouTube and Facebook. I'm going to hang up the phone, Clint.
Yep, we're getting text rolling in that says at
Oh,
least they can
brother,
hear
I
me.
got to tell you, I need to stick to fire and flame and smoke. And
I was going to ask you what's more stressful, that last 30 seconds doing this or the last 30 seconds taking that barbecue sample for one of those competitions?
oh, my goodness. Well, of course, I don't compete, but I'd rather cook a brisket than try to do this broadcasting thing. Brisket's easy.
Here,
Oh,
here.
brother. Okay, I believe we are live on both YouTube and Facebook. And if anyone out there is listening, do me the kind favor of just posting a note saying we hear you. So, because
Loud and
had
clear.
we had Neal on last month, and we had all kinds of technical problems. We couldn't get his audio through. We finally figured that out, and now we are both live. Okay, Clint says
Looking
Facebook
good.
is
Both
looking
sounding
good.
good.
Thank you very much, Clint. I know it's dinner time, but appreciate you coming by. And we had some YouTube guys earlier, so I think we're in business. Yes, okay, people are showing up. Thank you for your kind connections, folks. And I see YouTube showing up. We have licked the problems. Well, I want to welcome everyone. Let's thank you for showing up. We have a really great guest tonight. I don't know anyone who knows more about cooking on a flat top griddle than our guest Neal. And he is officially the flat top king. And That's his website, the Flat Top King. And I recommend you go check it out. We also have content related to the flat top, and they're both on the bottom of the screen. Um, Neal Williams has been doing this all his life, pretty much. Um, he was a flat top cook in the Navy, and he has been taking his knowledge of cooking on flat tops for a ship full of hungry mates to the backyard. And he has tested just about every flat top out there, all the gadgets and the gizmos and the cleanups. And boy, I got to tell you, I love cooking on the flat top. I hate the cleanup. So I'm hoping he'll give us some good tips on that. I was over on TikTok this week just looking around, and it seemed like a lot of people were asking, how do you get a brand new flat top ready for cooking? And maybe you can share some thoughts on that, Neal. And then also some tips on how to clean it up. So why don't you take the ball from here and introduce yourself and give us, if you would, a 30,000 foot overview of what flat tops are, how they work, and why they're so cool and why they are so popular.
Well, first, let me thank you for being on here. To me, it's an honor, it's a privilege being in cooking. I think most people know who you are, so to get that phone call and say, "Hey, would you like to join us?" Extremely ecstatic, to put it lightly. Like you said, growing up cooking. Now that can vary depending on how big you are in the ship size department. Luckily enough, we had an amphibious assault ship, so loaded up our crew is about 3,000 people. So easy to say that we can make anywhere between 12 to 1,500, maybe 18 to 2,200 servings of eggs in about an hour and a half period with three other people standing right beside you on the same griddle. So to say griddle cooking is ingrained in me, yes. The 30,000 view picture I'd like to say is basically griddle is just a rolled steel. There are different models out there now between stainless steel and ceramic coated. It's basically just a flat surface. They're traditionally known in these diners for burgers, for bacons, for cheesesteaks. How it's lit can be varied as well, in anything from live fire to typically propane, natural gas, so on and so forth. And when it comes to cleaning, hold your hat because there is a tried and true way, and then there's everybody else's way. So there's many ways to clean it And that, of course, goes along with what type of material you have on your griddle. Stainless is treated completely different than rolled steel, which obviously is completely different than ceramic.
So, let's start off with some of your favorite flat tops. Now, um, it's like back in the 40s or so, Frigidaire became the universal word for refrigerator. Jello for Jello desserts, Xerox for copy machines. Blackstone has become the generic term for flat tops, but whereas they probably had the field pretty much to themselves for a few years, a lot of other folks have jumped on the bandwagon. Tell us a little bit first, if you would, about Blackstone, and then who else is in the game, and maybe tell us some of your favorites.
Absolutely. I think I consider Blackstone an OG, right? You have to give the nod to them for what they do to the griddle community,
What's
the
an
outdoor
OG?
cooking community. Huh?
What is an OG?
We would consider you an OG, the young crew, the original gangster, right? Typically, the people that would go before us and pave the way. Um, with Blackstone's accessory line, their griddle lineup, it's not just one griddle they have; it's a griddle life. Everywhere from camping, RVing to the big style, they've introduced side burners to their griddles. They've introduced air fryers. They've come out with pizza ovens. They really incorporate what the griddle community is about. With that being said, when a new company comes out and they only have one product line, how great can it be? And I think that's where the separation is starting to happen. I've openly said this many times. Weber has come out of the gate. I'm not really pleased with their aesthetics, but the price warrants the aesthetics. It's not the most expensive griddle on the market, but yet edge to edge heating, it can respond very well to heat. I want to get to that a little bit later. And my number one right now is Traeger. I think Traeger has separated themselves from the pack. I hate when I hear people say that it's a X amount of dollar griddle because you're paying for the Traeger name. I have no beef in the fight. I've never had a Traeger before, so I only know what the griddle does, and I only try to represent and show you exactly what the griddle's doing, how it's responding, and why I enjoy it so much. That goes back to even cooking. It goes back to being able to hold low temperatures. I'm sure you're aware with you're dealing with propane and a heated surface, the longer the propane's on, the hotter the surface gets. Even if you adjust the flame, that still is going to build heat. Well, that's always been the case in the past. Nowadays, there's a lot of remedies out there. They've got a U-burner system. They've got dividers. If you turn it on low, it can maintain a fairly rare or fairly low temperature. But ultimately, once you crank it up, man, you can get some good sears out of it. So the universal line of being able to hold low for eggs, but able to pop it up for steaks is fantastic, and that's why I swear by it right now.
It's my experience as a relative novice that I fell for the same old problem that most people fall for when they start grilling. I turned it on and gave her all she's got, and promptly burned the heck out of the cooking surface and everything that made contact with it. And I realized, dial it back.
Yeah.
That the high heat is maybe good for a rapid sear on a steak or a pork chop or something, but if you're doing stir fry or something else, you need to get that heat down. Is that your experience?
Absolutely. One thing that I like to hang my hat on, which I think I've kind of found a niche in the griddling community, is I try to teach as much as I can in each video without being overwinded. But it's become basically a passion to where if I could just take the same recipe that you might have, but I have one trick of the trade that say, just for example, let's not brown your garlic on this one, because if you do, it's going to ruin the dish because the garlic needs to come through. And why we would do that, anyways, the point is I just try to teach. In the previous, I used to teach, you have to cook on low. You might as well, because the griddle's going to get so hot that you're never going to need anything above 450 to 500 degrees. You can sear a steak at 600, but if you blindfolded 10 people and put them in front of you and had the same steak seared at 600 or 500, I don't think they're going to notice the difference. It's
Well,
more about the quality of the product versus the 100-degree difference.
when I was trying to learn how to make great burgers,
Mhm.
grilling primarily, I started hitting the burger joints who made the best burgers that I liked. And I
Mhm.
started asking them about temperature. Well, first of all, most of them didn't know. But those who did know were cooking under 400 on flat tops, steak and shake. The others, they're down around 350, 375, which is interesting because when you think about it, when you're deep frying, 350 to 375 is your magic number for deep frying. So griddling in that same range, it's interesting that because you've got like a burger which has got a lot of fat in it, that seems to be a good number for folks. Do you use a gun thermometer, an infrared? You got one? There you go.
Show and tell. That goes back to what you said. So really quickly, there's a couple griddles on the market that I have like a big claim to fame about how hot they can go, and it just kind of pushes you back a little bit and said, "Have you ever stood over a griddle going 750 to 800 degrees? Like it's hard to breathe. That's a lot of heat pushing out. You know, that's a lot of temperature. So it's great and it's fantastic until you actually experience it. And I've always said that your oven probably goes to 500. You know, so when you want to jump the temperatures up there, there's not many foods that can handle that. So I would much rather have a griddle that cruises extremely effortlessly on low and let me adjust the temps accordingly versus trying to battle the temps and alternate burners and all that stuff. The infrared thermometer for beginners is an absolute no brainer, especially if you really want to dial in the temps. I try not to teach temperatures when I'm cooking because it's more about feel. Like I said, what is a griddle? The 30,000 view, it's a flat plate. Well, if you got a four burner system and you don't have even cooking to begin with, if you add, like you mentioned earlier, stir fry to 50% of your griddle, I can guarantee you that I can say your griddle is supposed to be at 375. Not within 1 minute to 2 minutes later, your griddle has dropped so much temperature where that food has hit the plate. It doesn't really matter if you're at 350 or 375 because you've lost all your temperature. Now you need to work about managing your zones with the food. Move it over, separate your griddle in two different spots, allow that heat to build back up, and then move your food over. But the most importantly thing we'll get to later, while you're doing that, you can also clean as you go. And we'll get in that a lot later. And that's probably one of my biggest pet
Well,
peeves.
you said something, it is a very different device than a grill. We often talk about how grills have three types of energy. They have warm air, which is convection cooking. They have radiant heat, which is when it's directly above glowing coals or flame. And they have conduction, which is when it's in contact with the hot metal grates. And on a grill over charcoal or gas, the metal grates aren't really a major cooking source. They do make grill marks, but grill marks are not as desirable as all over brown, which you can get from the infrared from the hot coals. But the key to working successfully on a grill is exactly what you just said about a griddle. So there's a lot of crossover, and that is multiple zones
Mm.
on a gas grill or a charcoal. We teach it's crucial to set up in two zones, and that is a hot zone with infrared energy directly below, and then a indirect zone which is convection air, and that gives you temperature control, energy control. You can move back and forth, and
Yes.
you can create great food that way. You're saying the same is true on griddles.
Absolutely. If you can imagine, let's just say fried rice, right? What's the point of fried rice? Technically, you're literally frying the rice. When you add the eggs, that's an argument that can go back as long as fried rice was made. Do you add the eggs first in the rice, or you add the eggs to the fried rice, and so the eggs can absorb the egg flavor? The point is let's say you're frying rice at 475 or 450, and you're getting all your ingredients incorporated. I wouldn't want to be putting eggs on 450. You know, I'm not a big brown egg person to begin with, and that's what's going to happen. So you need that temperature to be able to rely on your spots. Now, some people, let's dive into this really quick. Some people will swear up and down by some of the griddles that have hot and cold zones on them naturally. My personal opinion is I think they've been not naturally mentally fed into accepting it, because the older models, that's what they've done, and the new technologies come out to alleviate that. They're more accustomed to it and used to it, so they think it's normal. My argument has always been I want to be in control of the temperatures on the griddle. So if I need that griddle to hit 350 or 325, I just want to turn it down. I don't want to have to turn it off. I want to turn it down. If I want it to go to 450, let me control the temperatures. Some of these griddles have hot and cold spots where that propane comes in. We talked about that pressure building. There's no place for it to go, so it just sits there and idles. And there's so many flames coming out on low that that griddle gets 450 to 550 degrees even on low. Well, when you're doing eggs or you want to do a soft scramble or something like that, you got to relieve the pressure somehow on the griddle. So having that two-zone system, toasting buns, there's a lot of things out there that we do that teaches two-zone systems, and always, exactly what you just said, relieve the pressure. You got to be able to relieve the pressure.
Watching a griddling pro, and this goes back when I was a grad student. I remember I would work late in the in at school and work late in my lab, and then I would go to a burger joint downtown Chicago and sit at the counter right in front of the guy on the griddle. And wow, was that cool? He was a dancer. He was
Yeah.
moving, and he had multiple zones. I know it. He was. It's just a thing of beauty. And when you watch guys like you and some others cooking, I mentioned fried rice because it's a good place to do fried rice, especially if you don't have a wok. I mean, a wok is basically like a bowl-shaped griddle,
Yeah.
and it's really good for fried rice on a flat top because you can start the egg off to the side at a lower temperature. You can fry the rice at a higher temperature. When you add the soy sauce or the hoisin, now you're adding water. You're knocking the temperature down. You've got all these various temperature things going on, which brings me to an important question here, and that is the material that these flat tops are made out of. Some of them are better at retaining heat, especially when wet things hit them, and some of them are easier to clean. Some of them are very dark and they sear better. Some of them are stainless and they have different cooking. So tell us a little bit about the different surfaces that are out there and how they perform and which ones you like best, because I know you've cooked on them all.
I think stainless is probably the Cadillac, but also typically brings the Cadillac price. It's all commercial. Typically, it's commercial use, which is why there's a huge gap between residential and commercial. If you're allowed to get your hands on it, because stainless steel, it's a no-brainer. It can go anywhere from electric to gas as well. It holds a tremendous amount of heat. Typically, the plate's a little bit thicker. I think all of them that I've experienced, even commercially wise, if you add a certain amount of food or a certain amount of liquid, you're going to absorb the heat. To me, it's about how fast you can retain that heat because that's where the cook really happens. When you talk about, let's say stir fries, sometimes you need to evaporate that like a chicken teriyaki. You need that sauce to start boiling right away instead of just flooding your griddle and steaming and coming up slowly. Sometimes that Maillard reaction is what you really need. Let's drop it all the way back down to the bottom. Ceramics come out in the last couple of years by Pit Boss. The surface, it's almost like who you ask. There's some people out there that are diehard swear by it, that they haven't had a single problem. I've had problems out of mine. And it really just comes down to a ceramic coated Teflon style griddle. Teflon and ceramics, two different things, but it's the idea where it's coated. And I think with these griddle temperatures, the heat, even on low on a Pit Boss, gets too hot. So I think over time, it just breaks down that ceramic coated top if you're not careful. So we try to preach, like again, to put it on low, you might as well because it gets too hot. Not adding a lot of oil. If you go back to a traditional rolled steel griddle, which is probably the most traditional griddle out there, oil is very, very, very important because it's going to keep your griddle from rusting, lubricated, so on and so forth in the seasoning process. These ceramic coated are a little bit different. Way less oil. You don't clean it after you're done. I mean, you don't clean it with oil when you're done. Easy soap and water, clean it off just like a pan inside your house, and you're good to go.
Now, I'll let you continue in a sec, but I wanted to stick in a thought here. We've talked before about this subject, and you have also voiced your disdain for the ceramics. Now, I have ceramic frying pans, and
Mm,
I'm in love with them. I
mm,
think they are absolutely a company called Green Pan. I'm not paid
uh-huh.
to say that. And I mean, when I do an omelet, it just slides out of there like it's skiing down a slope. They're fantastic surfaces. I am just surprised, shocked that you have such disdain for them. And the pit boss is the one that has it. And I just wonder if, for some reason or other, I don't know why you've struggled with yours. I'm going to have to try and get my hands on one because we'll get to cleanup in a little bit. But to me, that is the biggest pain in the butt and the biggest reason that I don't griddle as much as I should because it's just such a pain to clean. And
Well,
if
imagine this. This is the easiest way to imagine it. Do you have gas or electric on your stove?
Guess.
Okay, so you turn your pan on, you add your butter. I'm sure you're a seasoned cook, so you can tell by the way your butter reacts what temperature's your pan at. Do you take an infrared thermometer out and check the temperature of your griddle, your skillet
No,
before you add your eggs?
I don't
No,
because I use the same pan every time
doesn't.
I do an omelet, and I
I'm
know
glad you
what
said that.
setting I get my best omelets at,
I'm
which is
glad you
about
said that
midway.
because that hits home to what I'm about to say. So let's say you have a 10-inch skillet or 8-inch skillet, right? And you add a 3-egg omelet to it. It completely coats the surface of the bottom. There's no heat. I mean, you're going to lose heat, but it also heats back up, right, from your
Yep,
stove.
that's
You
my
can
typical
control the
routine.
temperatures. If it gets too hot, you slide your pan off. See, in the restaurant business, if something gets too hot, you just move the pan off the heat. We don't very rarely we actually turn the temperature down because we're going to need that heat. If you turn the
Mhm.
temperature down and turn your pan off, you've got two compounding problems. You can't keep up in a busy kitchen. That's just restaurant 101. But as a home cook, you would naturally probably just turn the eye down on your stove and expect that temperature to drop. Now you take that same 10-inch skillet and make it a 30-inch skillet, and you had to heat up the whole 30-inch skillet. Well, if you're heating that up over and over and over again, that doesn't know that it needs to stay on low. Like I said, low is hot. It gets too hot. And the ceramic, I think, over time breaks down. So the griddle, in the areas that it's not being used, that heat just continues to build and build and build. You move food over, now all of a sudden you're working on half a griddle. There's a lot of times in our videos, if you put down 3 burgers for the family, that doesn't fill up a 36-inch griddle. Look how much open space you have, right? And that's the point I think of what's happening with these ceramic coated griddles is the heat over time is just naturally breaking it down because the ability not to be able to use the whole griddle at once and control the heat and back it back down. If you took your skillet, I can promise you, if you took your skillet for a year and put it on that thing and turned it up on like a I don't know if you have a medium or like a 6 or 7, which is probably going to get you about 450 to 550 degrees in your skillet if you use an infrared thermometer. Don't add any eggs to it and just turn the heat off and let the skillet or cool down naturally. It's going to break down, and I
Well,
think
in
that's
fact, I've had these ceramic skillets for a long time, and after about 2 years, they begin to lose their slipperiness. Now, I've just assumed that that's the surface that's giving way.
And
Um,
another thing is, like you said, you like to use it for eggs. But when you get a new griddle, what's exciting about it? You've already mentioned fried rice. We
mhm,
mentioned burgers. We mentioned searing steaks. So these griddles aren't used for one apparatus. They're used for a tremendous amount
mhm,
of
mhm.
applications. Bacon, sausage, and that heat will just continue to build. So when you're trying to do a smash burger, and let's say you want to do it at 425 because that's what you want to do, is that the best for the griddle application as a ceramic coated? You probably wouldn't take your green pan and sear a burger in it. You would probably opt to use a different or a different skillet for that application. Whereas a griddle, once you have that certain type of surface, you're kind of locked into. You don't have that option, so you use it for a multitude of cookings.
Now, you mentioned that stainless is, you think, the Cadillac. Tell us about that. But before you do, let me just tell the audience here. I see you're posting questions. That's great. We'll get around to them. If you want to ask questions, please post them. I'll go back up to the top and I'll work my way down through all the questions. But we want to lay the groundwork here first, and I think this is important stuff. And so hang in there, ask your questions. And my question is on stainless, what makes it so special? And you mentioned also that now I've gone shopping. I have I started out with my gas grill. I've got a gas grill that has some ceramic infrared burners in there to get really hot. And I wanted to, instead of buying a standalone griddle, I wanted to put a griddle top on there. And so I went shopping on Amazon. And I found a stainless steel unit that was pretty nice. But you warned me. Well, you after the fact, it was too late. But I got it really, really hot and I warped it. Now, I have since gone looking and I have found some that are really heavy duty and thick. And as you said, they're expensive. But if we can find a really heavy duty, thick stainless steel surface, should we jump on it?
That's a double-ended question. The steel itself would work flawlessly. It's how you're heating the steel that might be the problem. I'm assuming you're using like a burner system, like a 2 or 3 burner, kind of like outdoor style propane system that's
Yeah.
rounded.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the inside of a griddle looks like. If we ever broke a griddle on a ship, I could not imagine that the upset sailors on that thing. So I've never actually cut a griddle open and seen the inside of this one. So I can also say I don't know. My gut reaction is just because you have the perfect griddle doesn't mean it's heated perfectly, which would default the griddle itself.
All right. What other surfaces are there?
The most common and the most residential type is the rolled steel, whether it be cold or hot rolled steel. I haven't been able to determine the difference when I'm cooking on them. I don't know if one's greater than the other. It's treated just like cast iron. It's a seasoning process to where you get it brand new. You obviously want to clean it because the shipping oils are not the same as cooking oils. It just prevents rust. You want to get the dirt and debris off of there and start with a brand new clean surface. Season accordingly with a good high heat oil, and then from there, just have way with it. You got to make sure that you maintain it. You got to make sure that you clean it properly, and you got to make sure that you keep it seasoned just like you would a good piece of cast iron.
Now, I'm assuming that the audience knows how about cast iron and maintenance of it. Also, carbon steel needs to be handled the same way. What's the difference between this rolled steel that you're talking about and carbon steel, which is what my wok is made out of?
I think the carbon steel it acts like cast iron, but it's just manufactured. It's a little bit lighter. It's almost like a go-to. It's almost like the people in between a stainless steel like an all-clad or like a lodge cast iron. The beefiness and the thickness of the cast iron versus the lightness and the durability of the stainless, you come together and somehow carbon steel fits right in the middle. It can handle high heat extremely well. You still got to go through the seasoning process, and it's kind of like this new. I wouldn't say new, but it's a lot newer than cast iron. But it's in the cooking world. It's kind of like it goes back to when we mentioned about your omelet, right? There's certain applications where you'd want like a lighter pan versus a heavier pan, but ultimately it's still treated just like cast iron.
Well, now you mentioned seasoning it like you would cast iron, and this seems to be the most common question I see out there on social media. Talk to us about seasoning a rolled steel or cast iron griddle.
In simple terms, it's basically taking a certain oil and breaking it down to a scientific process, which I'm sure you know it more than me. And basically, it's a certain fat that polymerizes. So certain oils are better than others, i.e., olive oil is traditionally not used when you're seasoning cast iron because there's a certain amount of the right amount of fat composition in it, whether it be poly, or saturated. There's a certain fat out there that's really great for it. I personally like avocado or grapeseed. I've had the best results with them. I used to use Crisco a little bit, but it just seemed like my seasoning would break down a little bit faster than what I'd like. And the last basically year and a half, I've been on the avocado train, just switched to grapeseed and had extremely good success with it. You basically just want to burn the oil. It's literally the process of Thin coats. I cannot stress it enough. You have to do thin coats. If you get to, I'd much rather you do 3 thin coats than 1 thick coat. And the point is, you just stack layers on layers on layers, and these layers are the protection that your griddle needs, so it doesn't rust. It's
Let
also
me
the
jump in
protection
here
that
because
needs scraping.
let me jump in here and clarify a thought or two. The process that he's talking about for the rolled steel or cast iron griddles is similar to what you would use for a cast iron pan or a carbon steel wok or frying pan. They make a lot of frying pans out of carbon steel. And basically, even though the metal looks smooth, it has tiny microscopic pores and ridges and valleys. It isn't smooth. If you look at it up close with a microscope, it is textured. And the process is you not only use oil while you're cooking, which keeps things from sticking, as you know, in a frying pan, but you want to put down a layer of oil and then heat it. And it changes the chemistry of that oil and makes it from a liquid. Now, Professor Blonder, who is our science advisor, informs me it's not polymerization, as is widely believed. He says it's more of a glassification. And technically, from a physics and chemistry standpoint, he says it really kind of turns it into a form of a glass. And interestingly enough, I knew this before. Glass is considered a fluid. It can change, but in any case, you're forming a hard surface on top of the metal, and that hard surface is also non-stick. And one layer is not enough when you've got a brand new griddle or a cast iron pan or carbon steel. You need to do 2 or 3 layers to get a good, hard, glassy, non-stick surface. And the way you do that is you fire it up and you get it hot, but not too hot, right?
Right. Each griddle's different. Each griddle's different. You can reach those hot temperatures even on low.
Okay.
So just because we say hot, that does not mean, like you said, to crank it up on high.
I've heard that for cast iron, 450 is a good number.
There's a lot of them out there that reach 450 even on low.
Okay. So you want to get it hot, and then you want to pour that thin layer that he described of oil on there, and you want to spread it out and coat the surface, and then just let it cook for a while. And then you turn it off, or do you go right to the next layer?
You're looking for the visual. The biggest visual I can give you is when you first apply the oil. The first thing I'll tell you is your paper towel is going to rip, but don't be scared. Don't be nervous. Just get most of the junk off there as you can as possible, because the surface is rough. And your towel is going to be extremely hot and it's going to start burning. It's fine. It's just a process. What you're looking for is a visual. The smoke will slowly start to dissipate. And when it starts to dissipate enough, you know that your polymerization or your glassification has happened and you're ready to move forward with the next step, which is exactly the same thing as step 1. You add another thin coat and just start stacking.
Okay. If you're doing it for a pan indoors, they typically tell you let it cool, then hit it with another coat of oil, then heat it up in the oven or on the stovetop, the oven. I know an expert who says his big green egg is the best place to cure it. So that's the way we're going to cure the rolled steel. Are any of these surfaces, do the manufacturers ship them pre-seasoned?
Yes. The Camp Chef, I know for a fact, comes pre-seasoned. I'm sure there's other ones out there. I know I've been at Academy and seen one from Outdoor Griddle. I can't remember the brand, and it definitely looked pre-seasoned. Even with that, I look at it like a large cast iron pre-seasoned skillet. What's the first thing you do with it? You take the glue off, the sticky glue, you wash it, and you're going to go ahead and season it to your satisfaction, which is the same thing I'd recommend with the Camp Chef or any other pre-seasoned griddle. You can still take it steps further immediately to create just a deeper glassification, a more protective coat, and a more satisfying cook for beginners or experienced cooks at all.
Okay. So we got to talk about cooking, but as long as we're talking about the surfaces, Um, is there an advantage of cast iron over rolled steel? And then let's talk very briefly about the cleanup, the bane of my existence.
Yeah, I don't know if there's one advantage or the other. Like I said, there are people out there that swear by the ceramic coated pit boss griddles. They just haven't had problems out of them. So when being from the position where I've had problems out of them, then it's almost like you just have two different points of view. But I know for a fact by operating our griddle group on Facebook that I support the people that love theirs because that's what it's all about. They just had a different experience. Same thing with the rolled steel and the cast iron. We have people that absolutely dog cuss a rolled steel griddle because they can't keep it from rusting. And I'm not there. I try to help as many people as I can, but I just don't know what they're doing wrong or how much attention they're paying to the small details. And it's not hard. I think it's more about maintenance, not setting it and forget it. This is not something like a pen where you just set in the holder and then come back in 3 months later and it be like pristine. It needs a little TLC, especially being an outdoor system. I don't know if one performs better than the other. My guess would be thickness. I do know a lot of griddle manufacturers today are more aware of the warping issue, especially like you mentioned. When I very first started, warping was a big thing. How you turn on the burners, using all the burners at once. Just for example, just a little recap. When we talked about heat, when I first got my Camp Chef, warping was a big issue with a lot of griddles, not just Camp Chef. And a lot of the responses were, well, you need to preheat or heat up your griddle, all burners on low to allow all that heat to absorb, and then you can adjust from there. Well, doing so put you in a huge disadvantage because you couldn't hit those low temperatures anymore. But that was fair that was the same thing with other, like Blackstone and stuff like that. Nowadays, I've noticed that there's a big trend. Blackstone's hit on it extremely hard by adding bracing underneath to prevent it from warping. They put L brackets, like heavy gauge style L brackets underneath. Their brand new Omnitop not only has wind guards, but has L brackets underneath. The Halo, ironically, does not have any bracing underneath. It's one of the most powerful griddles on the market, but it's also one of the thickest surfaces of cast iron or rolled steel. I'm not sure which surface it is. And it is heavy for a 4-burner. There is no doubt about it. The heat retention is incredible because the mass is so large. I think it's thicker than all the other ones. But it also can run up there in temp. You got to be careful. That's one of the ones where you might enjoy the higher temps, but you also need to understand that you can't just set it and forget it on low and just expect low temperatures. You're going to have to alternate your burners. And that's what griddle cooking is about. What piece of equipment you have and how to use it. I don't know if one outperforms the other. I don't think that's the case.
You expressed earlier admiration for the new Traeger, which I think has
Yes.
only been on the market a year or less.
Yep.
What's a unit like that cost?
I want to say it's $8.99. It's a 3-burner. We did a video about it. A lot of people say, "Well, I want that 4-burner." I've preached 4 burners, for 3 years, and ultimately, it comes down to it's a large 3-burner. If you look at that 3-burner compared to the Weber 3-burner, it's night and day. It's closer to a 4-burner than it is a 3-burner.
Mm.
I did a test where I took the actual griddle off and put it on a 4-burner Halo when I did the Halo versus Traeger. And you'll be amazed how big the 3-burner is if you look at how big the 4-burner is. If you take a 4-burner and you can't use the whole 4-burner, because we just mentioned earlier about hot and cold spots, right? So let's say the left side, the front side, or your right side of your griddle is so much cooler that you find it to be a hindrance on some of the things that you cook. You're not using that space anyways. But what if you took a whole 3-burner and you can use edge to edge? Now you're not wasting any space. So even though it might be a little bit smaller than the 4-burner, I feel like you're getting maxed out of it. And you can control the temperatures, which is another reason why I like it.
Okay. I should add, if you're not familiar with Neal's website, he tests these things and he videotapes them. So if you go there, you'll get to watch him test and review and comment, and he gets deep into it. Yeah, if you know our website, AmazingRibs.com, Max Good tests grills and smokers for us. He does a similar in-depth review of griddles and flat tops. So if you're in the market, go there first. Let's briefly talk about some of the things you love to cook, and where a beginner should start, and some tips on technique, and then let's open it up for questions.
What I love to cook is just the four-letter word, food. You name it. It's what I'm in the mood for. I'm just a normal person. I'm like anybody else. When I crave Mexican food, let's throw some carnitas down. I think one of my biggest passions, um, in the last few years, have come basically intuition, is the ability to take a smoker or smoked meats or brisket or pork or something like that, and the flavors that you receive from there, I think we both can agree, are unmatched. But to be able to incorporate that into griddle cooking, I think is something that I've really trying to hold in on, and the results have been magical. We did a smoked brisket about 2 weeks ago by now, and we did a queso on the griddle, and did a brisket style cheesesteak that was probably still today one of the best cheesesteaks I've made. We took pork butt, cut it up in chunks, seared it on the griddle, smoked it for about an hour, and then dissolved 2 pounds of lard with orange, bay leaf, garlic, and onions. Let it come up to temperature on the smoker. Took the smoked pork. This is at the 2 hour mark. Put it in the lard and braised it for an hour. Then poured actual Mexican Coke in it and braised it even longer, and then shredded it for carnitas. While that was cooling down, we added green tomatoes, garlic, jalapeno, and onion, and blistered those on the griddle and made a green tomatillo salsa.
Mm.
So the ability to use the griddle and the smoker to me right now is my number one passion.
Wow.
Really quick on tools. The infrared thermometer for beginners. This is the perfect way to explain this when you have one griddle and one griddle only, is like I call it a Fitbit. Everybody wants a Fitbit because they want to know how many steps they take in a day, how many miles they go, and all that stuff. Well, when you do the same routine around the same neighborhood, you know how many steps it takes you because you do the same thing every day. This is a good way to get started, but we want to teach you more than what this shows you. We want to see how your griddle reacts, and how your food is reacting is more important, because I can shoot the whole griddle, but if you add something to your griddle, I want to be able to teach you how to move the food over to incorporate that heat, to be able to reduce that sauce a little bit better, to be able to get that Maillard reaction a little bit deeper on a steamed chicken versus like a crispy chicken. Those are some of the techniques that I try to teach, and I can't tell you the griddle temperature is 350 when the temperature just zapped down to about 200 degrees. And lastly, you know what? This right here is probably the number one tool in cooking. I think every cook in America should have one, something similar. They're extremely cheap, about $25. I know barbecue enthusiasts use something similar. Whether it be probe tender, you've heard that your whole life, whether you're checking doneness on a brisket, or where you're checking the internal temperature on chicken or pork. We get asked all the time. I cook chicken on my griddle and it's dry. And the easiest way to say that is, what temperature did you cook it to? 9 times out of 10, the response is, I don't know. That's the problem. It's not the griddle, and it's not the temperature you cook the chicken at, because sous vide and smoking proves that. You can smoke a chicken at 225. You're definitely never going to hit a griddle at 225, I can tell you that. But you can come out with fantastic results, because it's the internal temperature that matters.
A good digital thermometer and your instant read internal probe is the best for all purpose, is probably the most important tool in the kitchen. Now, some people will argue a good knife is, and that's a valid argument. I think you can make a fine meal with a dull knife, but it's very hard to get your steak perfect without a good thermometer. It's very hard to make sure your chicken is safe without a good thermometer. And if you want to go a step further, then that's your instant read probe thermometer, and that's going to read the interior temperature of the meal. And a medium rare steak is 130 to 135. It's not 125, and it's not 140. It's right in that zone, 130 to 135. And if you've ever stood at the head of the table and served steaks, expensive steaks, to family, friends, or the boss and overcooked it, you know how embarrassing and wasteful that is. So that's crucial. The other thing is with these flat tops, that infrared gun comes in handy, and I use mine also in my pizza ovens. So it's really good for that. And I use mine to check around my windows for cold air leaks in winter for insulation. So it's handy, a multi-tool.
Yeah.
Um, so, okay. Now there you go. Tell us about what you got there.
I get a little bit of grief about it, but it's funny because I still swear by it. It's basically a $10 or $11 spatula. It's the same one we had in the Navy. It's about 8 inches from here to here. I don't know if you guys can see that. And it's about 3 inches wide. The reason why I like it is because it's flexible. And it's got rounded edges. It's got the same edge all the way around. It's not sharpened. So let's start with why it's flexible and why I like it. I like the degree of the handle. It fits my hand perfectly. I can grab it. It feels just like an actual chef's knife, where you got the full control of the tang, which is the whole body of the handle. And the angle fits my hand perfectly. I like it flexible because if you've ever tried to take a stiff spatula and flip eggs or pancakes or something like that, to me it feels unnatural. It's almost like you're trying to use a shovel method versus a spatula method. I go from right to left, not forward and back. And it's also thin enough to where you can scrape those smash burgers off the griddle. It's thin enough to where you can get underneath delicate items like fish, tortillas, and stuff like that. You wouldn't think a tortilla is delicate until you try to manhandle a tortilla that's hot on the griddle, and you need to get underneath it, whether you're doing like a cheese quesadilla or something like that. Last but not least is the rounded edge. I like that because it eliminates a lot of the scraping, a lot of the sharp edges. If you take a scraper like this, well, the problem is if you're not careful and you are a beginner, then you can scrape that seasoning off your griddle because you're using it on the edges too much. You're scarring your griddle, and ultimately your griddle will start flaking. So all those reasons right there are exactly why I love an $11 spatula, and I swear by them. Now,
I like my painter's spatula, and I don't know if you can see, but it's beveled here. And
but you've also
like
got
that.
Stainless.
Pardon?
You've also got stainless.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I like this for getting those. I like this for getting those smash burgers up, because if you're not careful, they will stick.
This is just a Ben Heddle scraper from Traeger. I actually just started using it not too long ago, maybe about 3 or 4 months ago. Before that, this is what we use in the Navy. It's just bench standard bench scraper. And since it does have the edges, this is what allows us to clean the griddle. But I also cook with it. People are just amazed the fact that why would you cook with the bench scraper? Well, in the Navy, you're cleaning as you go. Like you had to. There was no you didn't look at your line down the list and say, we've got 700 sailors left. You guys hang on while we scrape our griddle. Right?
700.
So, well, that's only a third way through. So you're cooking 2,200 people at a time that wants breakfast in the morning. Yeah, you're pumping food out. So I would actually I gravitated toward just keeping my scraper in my left hand because we would make omelets. And the next thing you know, you're clanking together. You're tossing your vegetables together. And I've got my scraper here, clean over from the last mess. I've got 3 orders of eggs down on the griddle. And I didn't have time to put the spatula down or the scraper down to continue the run of eggs coming through there. So I actually cook with my bench scraper a lot more than what people would think.
If I'm coming to your house for dinner and you want to impress me.
Yes, sir.
What are you cooking?
That carnitas was pretty good. The brisket was pretty good. I'll probably keep it more fun. Let's say hot sauce rubbed pork ribs with like a Mexican seasoning as the seasoning, like you normally would, smoked. Taken all the way to about the 5-hour mark, and then basically wrapped in aluminum foil, boat style. Pour in some maybe like an enchilada sauce or something like that, and braise it the rest of the way to where it's fork tender. Take that meat up, chop it, have some fresh tacos with some like guacamole, salsa, something like that, and just have a good. I think a taco can open a friendship more than anything. food, something like that. Open a beer and just have a good time.
I'll have fun with that. You know what I'm cooking for you?
Yes, sir.
I'm getting a 9x13 disposable aluminum pan, or a stainless steel pan. I'm putting about an inch of oil in there. I'm taking some chicken, and I'm rolling it around in flour, and I'm deep frying on my griddle, because that sucker gets hot enough to get that oil up to 350 to 400, 350 to 375. That's your deep frying zone.
Yeah.
It'll get hot enough to fry chicken. And if you love fried chicken,
absolutely.
Doing it indoors stinks up the house, sets off the smoke alarms, spatters all over the stovetop and the kitchen counter, maybe the floor, and you end up sleeping on the couch. But you take that outdoors. Now, I've been doing deep frying in a Dutch oven on my gas grill for years, and I've written about this, and it makes perfect sense, and it's absolutely safe. You're not going to knock over a Dutch oven. You're not going to start a fire. And God forbid you did knock over if there's an earthquake. The worst that's going to happen is you're going to lose a $500 grill. If you somehow knock over a frying pan of oil on your kitchen stove, you could lose the house. So it's absolutely safe to do your deep frying outdoors on your griddle or on your grill. And you can make darn good fried chicken. Right now, I was just talking to my wife today. She was saying, boy, I got a whole bunch of green tomatoes out there and they're not ripening. So guess what? We're going to do some fried green tomatoes.
Check out my website. It's not a plug. Fried green tomato with homemade jalapeno pimento cheese bacon sandwiches. A BLT with fried green tomato.
Okay.
And homemade pimento cheese.
Okay. There you go, folks. Let's take on some of these questions. We've been going at it for, almost an hour already. I've scrolled through, and we have some good comments and questions. Let's take some. Tom Moxie, thank you, Tom. Tom says he's glad I didn't have a stroke trying to get the technical problem solved. Yeah, Tom weighed in early and saw me cursing. I had problems with Facebook, but we got it solved. Jesus, I am not cut out for this technology. Stephen Tate, he's ex-Navy, Neal, and he thanks you for sharing your expertise. Tom Moxie says he's 71 and he loves the Flat Top King.
Well, I appreciate that, Tom.
And Steve O says Neal's a great instructor and offers great tips and techniques, and is a pretty awesome guy too. How about that?
I'll take it.
Okay. Clayton Holderfield is asking, any thoughts about the Grilla Primate? I really like the idea of one device that can both grill and griddle. Now, I think I've seen a Blackstone that you can lift the flat top off and grill on, but that's a nice idea. What are your thoughts on those?
That was the Camp Chef, and they no longer make that model. That's why the term flat top grill, I get roasted all the time. It's not a grill, it's a griddle. Well, I used to have a Camp Chef, and that's how I started the Flat Top King, was through the Camp Chef. You would remove the griddle, and then you could have a grill. The problem is you couldn't close the lid because there's no lid on it. So a lot of heat would escape. So it was definitely more of a grill than it was a griddle, more than it was a grill. Fast forward, Weber has their Genesis models, and they're also their Spirit models, and they've incorporated. I'm like anybody else. I'm sure they saw the high results or the fantastic griddle community and said, we got to make one. Not only did they make a griddle, they made griddle inserts to go into the grass grills.
Yeah, this is worth pointing out.
And I've got the Weber Genesis 4-burner with a griddle insert. And I can be here 100%, look dead at the audience and say the grill and griddle combo has outperformed probably 75% of the griddles that have been in my presence.
Wow. Yeah, that's a nice feature. The only downside is that you got to remove the grates to get the griddle insert in there. And that's a little bit of an effort, and it's messy because they're often greasy. And then you got to find a place to put them.
Yeah.
without messing up the shelving and stuff. But that's a really and they do make these griddle inserts, and they're pretty substantial for most of the gas grills. So if you don't want to go out and spend $800 on a standalone griddle, that's a good option for you. Have you tried the Gorilla Primate? Do you know anything about it?
I do not.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, Clayton, but maybe he'll get around to it. Um, okay, Bob Parmenter has a ceramic, and he seems to like it.
He does. He's had very great success with his. He's followed all the logical rules in griddle cooking. Clean as you go. Keep the temperatures down. He's also very experienced when it comes to griddling and cooking. So he's one of the people that's not he's one of the people I can say that honestly he looks at me from the other side and says I haven't had this problem. I can't imagine having that one. And that's why I say I support everybody because everybody has their own different experience.
I think Bob's a regular here too, so it sounds like he probably has a kitchen but never uses it. Clayton Holderfield explains that cold rolled steel is carbon steel that's been work hardened at room temperature. Now, I'm not sure what he means by work hardened at room temperature, but apparently it sounds like it starts out as carbon steel.
It's amazing.
So
yeah,
work hardened, maybe it is rolled. Maybe they put, a steamroller on top of it and smoosh it. Joseph DeLuca, I leave my Blackstone out all year, covered. I clean and oil it after each use. However, I have found what appears to be rust build up on the cooktop at times. Have you found the covers trap moisture, which causes rust? Do I need to clean thoroughly and re-season again?
So let's break this up in two parts. If we're just talking about the rust, it probably depends on how much rust there is. You could get by with just scraping the rust off, taking like a little light sandpaper to it, and then just being mindful of that spot every time you cook. We mentioned about the ceramic coated griddle earlier about how we don't sometimes use the whole griddle surface. This is one of the times where you want to use that surface over and over, or that spot over and over and over again, because you want it to get seasoned back up. Don't avoid it because you just worked hard to clean it and you're scared to hurt it. You want to get those oils built back up in there. So your ground beef, your bacon, anything that's fatty, your vegetables, when you add a good avocado oil, something like that. So use that space. As for the covers, I hope we have enough audience to hear this. I wish this would go worldwide. This is the bad thing about covers. Covers keep moisture out. Well, what happens when it rains? What happens with humidity? It also keeps moisture in.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't think that because moisture rises. Well, when your cover's open on a deck or a patio or concrete or wood, people are like, well, I had it underneath a covered wood porch. I said, did any part of your porch get wet? Well, yeah, the sides. Where's your griddle at? Well, it's over on the side, but I had my cover on it. Wood absorbs just like anything else. Well, what happens when wood escapes? It evaporates. So now you have that condensation built up underneath the cover, and it's almost like a fail safe. You think you're protecting it from the top down, but you can also hurt it from the bottom up. So opening your, like on good days, just like opening your windows in your house, letting your house breathe sometimes. Taking your griddle top off and letting it breathe is always a good idea. Letting your cover breathe is a good idea.
That's by great coincidence. I had a phone call today with the engineers over at Traeger because I have the Traeger Timberline pellet smoker, which is their top of the line. It's just an amazing gadget. And they have just engineered and over-engineered. And one of the things they over-engineered is the cover. It weighs a ton. And you need a forklift to get the damn thing on. And it's got zippers for expansion. And it's got a front and a side and a back. And, well, first of all, I don't use covers. One of the reasons I don't use covers is just a pain to get them off and on. And after dinner, you bring in the steaks. You sit down and everybody eats and drinks. and has a conversation, and then maybe you move into the living room and watch a movie, and it's late and it's bedtime, and I forget to put the cover on. Besides,
You ever
when you're
mentioned
done
that
cooking,
the three
when you're
little
done cooking,
fingers of bourbon that you just had?
everything is hot. You can't put the cover on while it's hot. So I don't cover any of my grills. And another reason why is I used to run into that problem with the Weber Smoky Mountain. It was always getting moldy inside, really heavy moldy, nasty moldy. And I realized by leaving the cover off, I could defeat the mold. The problem is the way the lid fits on that thing. Water can get in, but um, I don't cover any of my grills, and now I've got this $3,000 plus pellet smoker, and I started covering it, and it has bamboo cutting board on on top of the hopper.
Yep.
And it turned black, mold, and it would, and for just the very reason you were describing. It got humidity underneath. It sits on a wooden deck. And within 2 weeks, it was almost entirely black. And there are two other wooden shelves that go underneath. They are black, and they were shocked. And now Traeger, I think, is in Utah. They're in a desert. He says, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in Illinois." And then there's this long silence. I don't think they tested this sucker in a humid Florida, Louisiana, Michigan. It's humid out here. You're in a bloody desert. So I'm just going to have to disinfect it, soak it in some water with chlorine, and then I'm going to paint it. And I just won't have a cutting board. I'll just have a wooden top on top. But yes, I agree. When I just something like a Weber Smoky Mountain, you got to put a cover on it, because if you don't, it'll fill up with water. But if you can get away without covering it, I'm not a fan. I don't cover.
Yep.
Now you've got a rust possibility, but that can easily be exacerbated by the covers. So
yeah,
there you go. Caroline Williams Johnson says the Flat Top King knows his stuff. You got a fan club, pal.
Yeah. Well, they came out in support tonight.
Yeah. Okay. Tom wants to know what's in the tumbler.
Oh, water tonight.
I usually have a wine glass here, but we killed the wine over dinner, so I don't have any wine tonight. I'm just swinging my camera arm out of the way so I can read the rest of the questions.
Another thing about them covers, like you mentioned, by the time you come in and sit down and enjoy dinner and all that stuff, not only is it frustrating, but sometimes with these pieces of equipment, they haven't cooled down enough. You got to be careful putting a cover on when it's too hot.
Okay, Bob Parmenter is saying cold rolled steel is low carbon content. Carbon steel is higher carbon content. Okay, so we're gonna have to do a little research here to get a better answer. We've got some partial answers here. Okay, another question: what causes flaking on the griddle top?
Basically a twofold. My first response would be too thick of oil and seasoned, or you're adding too much oil during the process. Not like when you're cooking bacon or something like that, but when your griddle's in the seasoning process, we can just hit on that very lightly. Your griddle can season 3 different ways. It can season when you turn the griddle on, because didn't we just mention that if you turn the griddle on low, it can hit 450 to 500 degrees? Well, if you use an avocado oil, and let's say your griddle starts seasoning the process at 425 to 430, it's already happening and you haven't put anything down on it at all. Well, you can also season during the process. We talked about using half the griddle at a time or a quarter of the griddle. Think about how dry that griddle surface stays. You mentioned deep frying. I'm actually in the process of filming a very in-depth, should I even fry on a griddle? Because I'm getting down to the nuts and bolts. I know. It kind of myth busts exactly what you just mentioned. Spoiler. The point is when you take a Dutch oven or aluminum pan or anything on the griddle, there's so much heat that you have to generate just to get that oil warm versus all the other options that you have. Because the first thing it hits is that griddle plate. Then that griddle plate disperses. Now you're trying to absorb the heat from another substance just to be able to heat up the oil. Well, if you've just got, like, say, a cake pan or a aluminum foil pan, but you got a four burner griddle, you're going to have to use at least 3 burners to keep that oil up to temperature. Well, at that point, look how much surface area is not getting used. You could go ahead and throw some oil down and season your griddle while you're deep frying. Let's say you're throwing smash burgers down for the family of 4 and you got a 4-burner griddle. If you turn your griddle on long enough and let it preheat and then only use half your griddle, you've got a dry section of griddle. Throw a small amount of oil down there, let it smoke, and you're already in the seasoning process. And lastly, once you're done cooking, you cook, you clean, you add water, you get everything cleaned off, you add a light coat of oil. You could also leave your griddle on at that moment and let it come up to a smoke point and let that smoke dissipate, and you've already seasoned it one time. So I preach in the method of 3s. Before, during, or after, you can actually season the griddle. So the flaking is because of too much oil in one of those processes. And the other reason it could be, we mentioned a tool like this. Sometimes scraping your griddle at an angle is going to dig into the seasoning. Next thing you know, the next time you go another way, you can pop your seasoning. And that can start the flaking problem.
Well, this is a good chance to get into the cleaning, to dovetail, because I do occasionally get a carbon buildup. Something will burn, and it is welded to the surface. And I've got to get out this sharp-edged spatula and get in there and scrape. And I'm sure I'm damaging the seasoning. And I'm a clean freak, and I want that baby clean. I don't want.
He's hungry.
No, she comes down the stairs and announces her presence. She's a lab, and she's exuberant, and she lets everybody know, I'm coming down. So I'm a clean freak. And also, we know that oil can get rancid when it sits around. So if there's any uncured oil in the season on top of that thing, okay, so you come in, you've finished up your cooking, you bring it all in, and like I said, you have a nice leisurely meal, and you're eating, and you're drinking, and you're talking, and you have a conversation, and maybe you go watch the game or a movie, and then you go to bed and you haven't cleaned up. Now, I know some people are really judicious about cleaning up immediately after, but I don't often get to clean up immediately after. I often have to wait until the next day or the next cook. So now I've got food scraps, I've got oil sitting on that surface, and I want it out. I want it off of there. I want a good, clean surface. When I cook indoors, I take that frying pan, and after dinner, it gets cleaned, and it gets spotless. And now a griddle is essentially a big frying pan. I wouldn't leave it sit in the sink overnight.
That's why I try to preach clean as you go, because it just makes so much easier. Like, there's a lot of residual heat on the griddle. Think about a smoker, for example, Meathead. Let's say you're bringing a brisket up to, let's just say internal 202. That's your target. Doesn't mean it's done at 202, but that's your target, right? You probe it. You think, hey, it's ready. Well, what happens when you turn off all your vents on your smoker? It doesn't automatically go to 0 degrees. You've got a lot of residual heat. It's in the metal. It's in the firebox. It's in the chamber. It's everywhere. Even the meat itself at 202 is producing heat at this time. Mm-hmm. So a griddle is the same thing. You can turn your burners off before you're done cooking. And actually, if you really want to get really, really down deep into culinary, you can actually clean your griddle by the food on your griddle. Let me repeat that. You can actually clean your griddle with the food on your griddle. And what do I mean by that? When you're cooking at high temp, you have a lot of evaporation. If you notice vegetables, for example, squash, zucchinis, once they get mounded up, they excrete a lot of moisture. But you start doing thin layers with it, then all of a sudden that water evaporates, and that's how you get the browning. Same thing with meat, ground beef, you name it. Once all your stuff is cooked, and you can actually turn off your griddle a little bit before your product's done. If you let your product, if you're not worried about it if you got something on your griddle that you don't care about it overcooks, we're not talking like a medium rare steak. We're talking about something different, like taco meat or vegetables or something like that. The moisture will actually release the fond that's on the griddle. Okay, the moisture from the product that you're cooking will not steam as much and release, and then once you start scraping it, will take the fond off the griddle, which is why I preach clean as you go. Once that food starts calming down, you haven't even taken it off the griddle yet. Move it over, clean half your griddle, move your product over to the clean side, clean the other side. Now most of your food debris is off. Now once you serve your product, you've got a pretty decent chance of cleaning that griddle a lot faster.
Okay, let's get down to cleanup. Let's say
Yeah.
we've moved everything off. We've got it in
Yeah.
serving plates and bowls. We either clean up right now, or we bring it in and serve it, and then we get out there after dinner and we clean up.
Yeah.
What is the best way to clean that griddle and not destroy the seasoning?
Yep. It goes back to the idea of the 3-step process I like to teach. Easy, medium, and hard. Easy are going to be like eggs, quesadillas, toast, anything where you add a fat to your griddle naturally and you're not making a big mess. Because let's say you add butter, you add some scrambled eggs and cheese or an omelet, all you got to do is take a paper towel and wipe it off. You're done. Once the food gets on the plate, you don't have a lot of residual dirt left on your griddle. When you could cook a whole pound of bacon. Once the bacon's done, you transfer it to a paper towel. You just wipe all that grease off, get in your grease bucket, take a paper towel, wipe it off, and you're done. Right? That's what griddle cooking is about. Pancakes. You could do like it depends on how messy you are, but I just did like a smoked turkey Rachel with a homemade coleslaw. That would be one of the ones that didn't make a big mess. So I didn't worry about cleaning it that much. Once the product came off, I was already cleaning as I go. I took a paper towel, wiped it down, I was done. Because all I did was add bread basically to the toast and then build the sandwich on there and then flipped it. So I didn't really use the griddle for like a lot of deep cleaning. So that would call that easy. Medium would be kind of like your burgers. Anything that you would use on there like steaks, burgers, chickens, stuff like that. You might have to scrape a little bit to get the fond off. You might have to add a little squirt of water to deglaze to get some of the stuff off. Kind of like a little more involved process. Vegetables, I would call a medium. Anything like that. When you get to hard, it's kind of like your pastas, your teriyakis, your fried rices, anything with a syrup. Like if you did a chicken teriyaki, if you did a chicken fried rice, if you did a taco meat, if you did, let's just say, a chicken Alfredo, and you actually made the Alfredo right on the top. You could do your chicken, you could do your broccoli, you could add boiled pasta to your griddle top. Next thing you know, you add heavy cream, butter, and Parmesan cheese, toss it all together, and serve it immediately. You're going to have a little bit of mess on the griddle. That's more involved, and that's where it comes down to the person. No matter what happens, I'm at least scraping down and getting the fond and the food off. That's the bare minimum. I can come back and steam clean later. And I just want to eat.
Just kind of steam clean.
Small point now. Huh?
Are you using water?
I was just going to say, I just want to hit on this point really quick. When you use water, imagine this. Don't take a 5-gallon bucket of water and throw it on rolled steel and expect it not to warp. That's not the point of the process. I like to divide the griddle up into 3 or 4 spots. Sometimes I just do corners depending on how big the griddle is. You take a bottle of water, you take a little corner, because remember that griddle's trying to calm down. It's 450, 500 degrees. You douse the whole thing with cold water. It's not a good ratio of cold to hot. Something's going to happen. Take a corner of your griddle, a fourth of your griddle, add some water, let it steam, and scrape it off. Take your next corner, do the same thing. Take your next corner, next thing you know, your whole griddle's been steamed. Take some paper towels, wipe it off. That water will evaporate, so when you're done cooking or eating, you come back out, you've got a lot cleaner surface. You can add your oil at that time and then be ready for the next day or the next cook.
Do you ever get around to using these things? All right.
Yes and no.
The orange thing is like a scrubby sponge.
Scrub Daddy. Yep.
And it comes off here. You can buy
Mhm.
it, and it comes with like 10 or 12 of these things here, and you can flip it over, and you can probably get 5, 6 or more uses out of it. In fact, I keep one in the kitchen sink now because it's really good for frying pans and stuff. And then
Yeah.
there's this. Get used to this camera here, which is pumice, which
Yep.
is volcanic rock. And
Absolutely.
that is really abrasive. And I used this on my stainless and ruined it.
I agree. I tried to tell you.
I didn't have you to teach me.
So the idea with a stone is the stone is going to get the stone is like taking a pressure washer to paint or a sealed wood. Like let's say you accidentally spill something on sealed wood and you take a pressure wash to it. Well, not only did you get the stuff off you just spilled, you also just took the stain off with it. Same thing of like we just talked about how important it is to season your rolled steel. The stone just takes it all the way back to bare metal. So it's amazing how many people say they use it on an everyday basis, and I just cringe. I completely cringe. I couldn't fathom.
Then there's this guy, which has a handle. This is
That's
overkill.
professional right there, buddy.
This is for you got a little you got a graph.
Done that. Yeah, that's memories right there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty serious here.
Yeah.
And and you can remove the blade. It comes with spare blades.
Yeah.
That's pretty nifty. There's one here that I haven't tried on my griddles yet, but I've been using this on my grill, and this is called Grill Rescue. And I was really skeptical. It's a spongy-like material, and then it's wrapped in something like fire hose material.
Yeah.
You can see it. It's pretty disgusting looking. What you do is you soak it in water, and it soaks up the water real quickly. Just do it in the sink or in a pan, and then you scrub down your grill grates. It works. This may be now my favorite grill cleaner. I bought it on Amazon, Grill Rescue, and it really does a super job of getting those grill grates clean. It steams them. I mean, you've got water and a scrubbing surface, and it really does a nice. And it's got a little scraper on the end there. You gotta learn this camera stuff. You can see I still got junk on the scraper. So all kinds of give them cracks so if you're into gadgets, griddling is the way to go. And then there's
there's just one visual I can just give you right now. So in the Navy, you can imagine my surprise the first time we ever not deployed, the first time we ever did a sea trial where the ship left the docking area. You can imagine being in port. The seas are pretty calm. You get out to the seas and you hit your first rough seas on a big amphibious assault ship. We're all on the griddle. We're making breakfast that morning, and you'd put the eggs on the griddle, and the person 2 people down from you would be scrambling for you because the ship would rock. Now we didn't stop cooking.
I can't imagine.
Coming down. Yeah, here they come. And when we'd clean the decks, swab the decks at the end of the night or between shifts, we'd have a drain hole on one side of the kitchen, a drain hole on the other side of the kitchen. And when the ship would rock, we looked like we're playing the Olympics with luge. What's that Olympic one where the ice and they got those brushes?
Oh yeah.
So we're following it down to the drain, and everybody's following the water to the drain. And then when the ship goes the other way, we follow the water right back down to the drain to get it off of the deck as fast as possible. So yeah, those are some good days. So
here's another tool that you might want to get. Now this is cast iron. It's very heavy. And this can be used, for example, say you got a steak. You want that steak in contact with the metal. You don't want it cupping. And especially on a pork chop, for example, if there's still a layer of pork on one side, fat on one side, there's usually some silver skin underneath it, and it will cup. And you want it flat. So you lay this on top. Or you're doing a grilled cheese sandwich. You can lay this on top, and you can also use this when you're making smash burgers. Now, tell us about the smash burger technique, because a lot of people are using a paper of some sort to make sure that the burger doesn't stick to this thing. How do you go about that? What's your technique?
Well, sit. I feel like a large majority of my audience are beginners, and I like to teach things that relate to them. So adding parchment paper is what you're talking about. They can come in discs, like round discs, or they can come in just a sheet of parchment paper. I used to do sheets of parchment paper, but I got tired of taking it off, ripping it. Then you're smashing a round thing into a square thing. So now I've evolved into the discs.
Well,
There
I
are
never
you
I
can
never knew
use
that you can
spatula.
buy parchment paper in discs.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yep.
just have a roll of parchment paper, Reynolds or something. I pull it off, tear it, and then I cut it with a pair of scissors into the right
Yep. I got
size.
tired of that. Yeah.
And
You could do this two spatula method and all that stuff, but if you get a good, I, I, in the Navy, we didn't smash burgers didn't exist in the Navy. We had frozen burgers. There's no way in the world we're going to take. We had 40-pound logs of ground beef. We're not breaking that down into 2.5 to 3 ounce balls for 3,000 people. We're not making 6,000 balls of ground beef for one burger. So it's unrealistic to think like that. The equipment, sometimes people actually set their spatula on the griddle to warm it up and then they smash. I've never had a good success with that. Some people take a ball of beef and put it on the griddle, give it about a good 20, 30 seconds, and actually starts that Maillard reaction. Then they're able to take their spatula, flip it over. Since the beef has started to brown, then that creates that sear zone, and you can smash it down and have your utensil stick as well.
I never
Here's
thought of that. And you don't need parchment paper for that?
no,
What
and then
about just grease in the back of the spatula or the weight? Will that work?
I've had a little success with the weights.
Doesn't work for me, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Since I try to teach for the beginners, I just stick to the parchment paper when I do it. Off camera, I can do it and get away with it. It's kind of like the idea of peanut butter. If you take peanut butter on an extremely soft piece of bread or cold butter, that's a perfect example. You can't smear cold butter. And peanut butter, you better learn to go left and right because as soon as you come up off the peanut butter, you just ripped your bread. Same thing with the burger. You can smash it down, but you got to learn how to kind of like glide your smasher off of it, which also helps create you a thinner burger. And you can get it done that way, but it's extremely hard to teach without looking like a goofball on camera. And it's just something that I think that for beginners and they really want to get involved with it, just having a good piece of parchment. I've tried to teach people the art of the smash burger, and actually like smashing it down takes practice. Because when you're with somebody brand new that's never done it before, they have no idea how hard to press. They have no idea what to feel for. Just because you press down doesn't mean you've got equal pressure all the way around. And when they lift up, they've got, lacy side on one side and they've got like, a big old knot on the other side. Mentally, they just didn't realize you got to adjust your wrist to go down with it to get that perfect smash because it's a 360 motion. It's not just
Well,
smash
the key
straight down.
the key to the smash burger, of course, is you want, and you use the word, lacy edges. You want those edges to sort of lace out and then make contact, and that gives you
Yeah,
nice crunchy edges.
yeah. And then you get the
Here's
people
another
telling you that you just overcooked it.
gadget you need. Um, Now they're round, square, dome. This one has a little Weber style vent on the top to let
Yep.
steam out. What do you use these for?
Really about anything. We just made homemade English muffins. That's a perfect, idea for the
Really?
griddle. Yep. And we use that to help create that convection on the inside. Um, anytime you're melting something, I don't see it used near as often, but like I said, I don't like brown eggs. Um, we just on that same video, we add a little steam to the egg molds because that steam helps not only cool down the griddle, but also helps that convection. And if you're not worried about an over easy or like a sunny side up egg, You don't care if it's, cooked on the top or not. But it helps just keep the eggs moist and kind of steam instead of getting like that hard, crusty bottom on the bottom of an egg. I'm just not a big fan of that.
Well, you absolutely need them for cheeseburger.
Thicker ones, I think the thinner ones, it's so thin, it happens so fast. Typically, you double stack it as well, so you get that heat from the bottom. But the thicker, stuff like that, if you do a compound butter, I'm trying to introduce our audience to doing more compound butters because of flavor profiles. We talk about how fast griddle cooking happens. I think if you're not careful with your technique and the Maillard reactions and the crust that you're building, you can overlook a lot of flavor. And to compound that, you should use compound butters. So that would be a great way to.
I'm writing a book now, and I have a whole section on compound butters. And if you haven't tried Café de Paris compound butter, oh my goodness, remind me afterwards. I'll send you the recipe. It's a classic recipe. It's developed in Switzerland for steaks. Café de Paris. It's a great compound butter. Tom Moxie answered our question. The sport where they're pushing the stone is called curling. I should have known that. And
that's exactly what it felt like.
And he also says that he likes to clean up right after dinner, gets that thin layer of oil on there, and he can have another beer before he has to go sit with his in-laws.
He might have to have a sicker drink. Beer might not be the answer, buddy.
Hey, guys, we are closing in on 90 minutes, and usually that's my limit. I have enjoyed this immensely. I've learned a thing or two. I hope you have too. Neal is truly impressive in his knowledge and expertise on griddling. And by the way, he knows his way around a grill and a smoker too. He's got great videos. Take your time because they tend to run long. But there's a lot he packs them with information. And there's a lot of good technique and a lot of recipes and fun on his site. And he's going to be contributing some content to our site as well. Because we want more griddling info, and I'll be doing some writing on the subject, as will he. So let's take a quick look. I see a couple of comments are coming in, see if any of them is a question. Gary Hammond says, you are spot on. And Tom is saying good evening, and I'm going to say good evening. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us tonight. This has been really fun, and we have, if you haven't seen the announcement, we have moved from the last Thursday of the month to the last Wednesday, so we're not competing with Thursday night football. Instead, we're competing with the Republican debate. So there's just no escaping competition. But I appreciate your attendance and your attentiveness. And as usual, this will be archived on YouTube and Facebook. Neal, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all for now, folks. Thanks for staying awake, and please visit AmazingRibs.com for the articles, recipes, and reviews mentioned in this chat with the Barbecue Whisperer and Hedonism Evangelist from AmazingRibs.com, the planet's biggest and baddest barbecue and grilling website, Meathead.
It's